Hi everyone. Just a little unscripted video here today to try and demonstrate the sort of proof of concept of Gremlin Query Debugging using G.V. So a really simple example today. I'm just going to go through a couple of queries here and there and show how we currently have the debugging working, what it does, and sort of try and document the steps of design as I go through it in the future and make other videos to sort of explain how it gets developed, what gets added into it, why, and hopefully how it exactly shows sort of value you can achieve by running through your queries with this debugging tool. So in this example, I'm just going to be using the air routes graph made by Kelvin Lawrence. I've just picked a few queries from the book that I'm just going to run through with the debugger, so we just have a quick look at what happens. Here we go. So the way it works, quite simply, is it just runs through the query step by step at the moment. And what it allows us to do is to easily visualize how the query evolves as you step through it. So for instance, right now, we're running the query up to here, and we can see that we've got a total of 500 nodes being returned, and we can view them through various views available on G.V, so the graph view, the vertex view, etc., etc. But as we step through the query, we can sort of see how the results are changing. So now at this stage, we're suddenly looking at only this subset of regions being covered. And if we want to step inside this OR condition, we can actually see how the results evolve as we add in more regions to the query. So here we have all of the regions, all the airports rather, covered by this region. If we step through to the next one, suddenly we'll have these plus US LE, etc., etc. And so we can see as we run this query through and through that our node count is going to increase. Now, if I keep running through my steps, I can continue to see my results evolve and change as the query progresses, up to the point where I'm going to run, for instance, value map, where we can see what happens at this stage. And eventually, as we run the select step, we can see the final output of the query. So just a first example here to kind of see the rough idea of it. Now, in terms of the navigation, as you can see, we're capable of navigating both steps as a whole, but also the sub-traversals of a given query, meaning that if you have a complex query that perhaps will have several nested traversals, you can run for each individual step within these traversals. So we're just going to take another small example here. So same idea, we're starting with our initial set, and then we're restricting to this one airport, and now we can quickly see that with the running of this debugging step, we can essentially visualize, in this case, all of the airports that come out of this one. So again, we've got our graph view that we can easily filter. We've got our vertex view as well, where we can see the results as a table. And of course, we've got our normal query output, which will give you both the Gremlin version and a sort of conveniently formatted JSON version. So as we keep walking through this, again, we can see the results evolving. So actually, if I step back real quick right here, you can see here at this stage, we've got a list of five reports, apologies, filtered, or actually 4. And we can then see what comes out of it and keep stepping through it again and sort of just see what happens. And eventually we'll get to the point of building this path and get to our final output, which is this one right there. So just another little query to see what happens as you step through things. Just the last one. For a quick example, I'm going to pick this one because it's actually a good way of quickly visualizing how the group step works. So again, I'm just going to run through this pretty straightforward up to this point. We're just getting 10 airports. and then we're grouping them. And you'll see initially when you call the group step, it will just group the results by themselves, essentially. So for instance, our first airport's going to output itself. And once we add the by runway step, then you'll see that we're now being grouped by those values instead. So you can see that the first by of the group step will determine the key of your map to be generated. And then the second by step will return the results. So a very easy way to sort of see how these steps run and what they do. So this version of the query debugging is, of course, a really early one. The idea is to try and come up with a viable concept for the debugging of Gremlin queries. And the purpose of this video is to try and illustrate the process of getting to that point and the sort of various evolutions that the feature will have within GW. So at the moment, it's not something that will be available for users to use. It's a little bit too rough on the edges, but as features keep getting built, hopefully there will be a point in the coming month where this will become generally available. In terms of roadmap at the moment for this feature, there's a few fairly obvious next steps. Support for the most common debugging aspects. So for instance, breakpoints, which is likely the next thing that's going to be introduced, but also the ability to visualize results by hovering steps. Another quick note is that currently this version of the debugging is really just showing what happens step by step. But what would be interesting eventually is to see what happens between the steps and to be able to compare the results between the steps as well. And so this will likely be something else that will be looked after. But for just now, this is the initial version. I hope that it's of interest. If you've got any questions, do feel free to let me know, and hope you enjoyed. Yeah.